Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us to talk about the governor's proposal to help reduce gun violence, especially in domestic abuse situations, and to promote gun safety. We think that our measures will save lives. I can't say it more simply than this. An abuser with a gun puts women and families in grave danger. Domestic violence and access to guns is a lethal combination. A domestic abuser with access to a firearm is 5 times more likely to kill their female victims. Unfortunately, each month in our country, an average of 70 women are shot and killed by an intimate partner. That's 70 women a month in our country, and we've already had too many intimate partner homicides where women were killed in our state this year. In Connecticut, 59% of the female murder victims are killed by an intimate partner, and out of those, 41% are killed with a gun. Yesterday, our state's Judiciary Committee heard some very powerful testimony from so many on the governor's gun safety proposal. And today, we want to talk specifically about the governor's gun safety proposals that include very common sense provisions to keep women and families safe. And they're very simple and powerful proposals. First, we want to require a 10-day waiting period before purchasing a firearm, delaying instant access and preventing impulse acts of gun violence. We think this cooling off period is really important. Right now, an abuser can simply, with the right documentation, walk into a gun store and walk out with a gun, and then immediately go to a very violent situation. Making family violence crime an automatic disqualifier to obtaining a pistol permit is another one of our proposals. If you've been convicted of a family violence crime, you shouldn't be allowed to purchase a pistol and get a permit. Expanding Ethan's Law by requiring safe storage of weapons in all homes, regardless of who has access to the residence. You'll recall a couple of years ago, we passed Ethan's Law to protect children and minors in homes where there were guns. And we think it just makes sense to protect everyone in a home, regardless of their age, and require that there be safe storage of that weapon and that ammunition. Our administration is very committed to the idea that one incident of gun violence is too many. It's really important that the legislature act now. We very much appreciate the advocacy of all of our partners who are standing behind me, especially Mayor O'Leary and Chief Spagnuolo, Megan Scanlon, who's the president and CEO of the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence, CCADV, and Jeremy Stein, who is the executive director of Connecticut Against Gun Violence. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Mayor O'Leary, who's been just a leader with mayors across the state in promoting gun safety. Mayor.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Okay, Paul.
I can't talk.
Okay.
I'm Paul Penarowski. I'm president of the Board of Aldermen here in Waterbury. And while Mayor O'Leary did wish to speak this morning, unfortunately, he has laryngitis and is unable to use his voice. So he asked me to stand in for him. So I will try to fill the mayor's shoes at this point. But we're happy to have the Lieutenant Governor here today to talk about this important issue, especially in a large city like Waterbury, where gun violence is such a problem. And we're happy to support the governor's proposal, the lieutenant governor's proposal, because as the lieutenant governor said, these are really common sense approaches to addressing gun violence. They're very significant, they're very serious, but they are common sense. To increase a waiting period, to increase the educational requirements, to require safe storage of guns in the home, these things, it almost seems like you shouldn't have to pass a law to make that work, but it's important that we do it. Most importantly, to look at the domestic violence and the fugitive status of someone and say that people who have that record shouldn't have guns. I think that's something that we can all agree on. So thank you for your advocacy on this, Lieutenant Governor, Governor Lamont. We hope that the legislature will take this very seriously, consider it very seriously, and we urge them to pass this legislation to help, lessen gun violence and deaths across the state, especially in cities like Waterbury. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. We appreciate it. Next, I'm going to introduce our host for the day, Lee Schlesinger, Safe Haven of Greater Waterbury. He is the executive director, and thank you so much, Lee, for hosting us today. Appreciate it.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for all the dignitaries that came out today to hear this important message. I think you've already heard the statistic, but the national statistics show that a woman in an abusive relationship is five times more likely to be killed when the abuser has access to a gun. Domestic violence assaults involving a firearm are 12 times more likely to result in death than those assaults using other weapons and bodily force. In these abusive relationships, firearms are not only used to kill the victim, they are also used as a form of intimidation, used to threaten or coerce the victim. They can range from the victim seeing the gun in her abuser's waistband in the glove compartment of the car, cleaning the gun in sight of the victim, sleeping with the gun under the abuser's pillow, threatening to kill the victim or her family or the family pets. These all leaving the victims feeling trapped with nowhere to go, helpless. Quick story, a retired detective from the city of Waterbury once told her story at one of our events. Prior to her being a police officer, she was in a violent relationship. Her offender owned 12 firearms. He had machining tools in the basement where he would make bullets. He would take those bullets and throw them at her when he felt that she did something wrong, all showing everyone that he was in control. It's essential that we take steps to prevent gun violence and protect victims of domestic violence. This includes implementing stricter gun control measures like those included in this bill introduced by the governor and lieutenant governor. We want to thank the lieutenant governor and governor for their support and continued leadership. Thank you.
Lee, thank you so much. I'd like to introduce Megan Scanlon, executive director of CCADV. Megan.
Hi, good morning. I want to thank the Lieutenant Governor and the Mayor for hosting us in the city of Waterbury, and obviously Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence stands in support of this bill. Safe Haven is one of our 18 members across the state that are serving survivors and their families each and every day. I think the biggest thing that takeaway for us in this bill is at the federal level, you're already disqualified from possessing a firearm. What this does is it aligns our state law with the federal law, because right now individuals, although they might be convicted of a domestic violence, family violence crime in the state of Connecticut, they can still possess a gun permit. So that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So this closes that loophole. So we're very much in favor of that. It keeps victims and their children safer across the state, because we know that gun violence is not just in the cities. We've certainly seen over the last year, this past year, Connecticut had 12 homicides, confirmed family violence homicides, 9 of which were with a firearm, many of which did not happen in cities. And we currently have averaged this year almost at least one homicide, if not murder, suicide a month. So this is certainly a public health crisis that we want the legislature to address. And I think that proposal, and in addition to the 10-day waiting period, will do a lot of good in our communities to keep women and especially kids safe, because we've obviously seen, as we've started 2023, more children are subject to these gun violence situations. We've had more children over the last year into this year victims of the gun violence within the home, whether it's been a murder-suicide or family violence issue. So that's not okay, and we need to do better for the state of Connecticut, and this bill moves us in that direction. And so I am extremely proud to stand here and say that we are in support of this bill, that we thank the governor and the lieutenant governor and those leaders in the legislature that have gotten it this far, and we obviously urge them very swift passage of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Megan. I'd like to introduce Jeremy Stein, who is the Executive Director of Citizens Against Gun Violence. Jeremy.
Thank you, Susan. I want to thank our Lieutenant Governor for always being a champion on gun violence prevention. I want to thank the Mayor for hosting this today, the Safe Haven and CCADV for just making sure that our families are protected. And I also want to thank the Waterbury Police Department and Chief Spagnuolo, who I saw last night testifying in support of the governor's bill, and has always been at the forefront of making sure that we are protected from guns. Last night, we were at the Capitol for about 12, 13 hours at the public hearing for the governor's bill, and I'm here to tell you there's a tremendous amount of support for life-saving laws. We are going to pass this bill this year, and we're going to make sure that Connecticut is still at the forefront of making sure that we are saving lives and that we have the strongest gun laws in the country. One of the stories that we heard, there were a couple things that I want to tell you about that we heard. One, there was a lot of debate and a lot of discussion about the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court's ruling. And it is alarming that we have a Supreme Court in this country that protects guns more than they protect women. And so we have to do everything we can in Connecticut to make sure that women and families are protected first, above and beyond our firearms. Secondly, I want to tell you a story that I heard last night from one of the advocates that was in support of this bill, and she talked about how a member of her family, I think it was her grandmother, said that she wanted to get a divorce, and she told her husband that she did not want to be married to him anymore, and she wanted a divorce. And then the husband went into his dresser drawer, took a gun, shot her in the head, and then killed himself. And this happens all the time. Domestic violence and suicide and guns, we see this public health crisis affect our state and our country all the time, and we need to do better to make sure that we are protected from this kind of violence. Something as simple as this safe, something as simple as this that you can buy at a sporting goods store for less than $100 can help to save lives. Waiting periods can help to make sure that people do not act rashly in the heat of the moment and kill themselves and their loved ones. This is preventable death. We need to do everything we can to protect our families, and I applaud the governor and the lieutenant governor for all they've done for Connecticut, and will do this legislative session. Thank you very much.
Jeremy, thank you. It's my pleasure to introduce Chief Spagnuolo, who's just been a tireless and fierce advocate of public safety, including these governor's proposals, and we really appreciate all of his support. Chief.
Lieutenant Governor, thank you, and thank Governor Lamont and his administration for having the strength and fortitude to put forth common sense gun safety solutions and gun law solutions that could really help this state save lives and persuade people away from gun violence. And that also includes the four mayors of the major cities' gun proposals that they provided to the Judiciary Committee as well. There's no more appropriate setting to have this press conference today other than Safe Haven here in Waterbury. The work that they do for victims of domestic violence and their families is incredible. I do come here today with very sorrowful news, with a heavy heart. because our community has been stricken with gun violence again, yet once again, early this morning. At 5:15 a.m. this morning, Waterbury police were called to Mark Lane in the city on a report of shots fired. Officers arrived there, began their investigation, and found that during the course of a domestic violence disturbance, a mother and wife and a son that was involved in that family were both shot. The mother has succumbed to her wounds and is now deceased. So we are in the process right now of conducting a murder and assault with a firearm weapon investigation. We do have a very strong suspect in this investigation, and it's once again incredible to me that this suspect fits the footprint and the criteria that myself and Mayor O'Leary and the mayors of the other major cities have been talking about for several months now. He's a convicted felon. He's convicted of drug offenses. He's convicted of prior firearm offenses. He should not be in possession of a firearm, yet somehow had the opportunity to, this morning, fire upon his wife and son, killing his wife and injuring his child. This is not to mention the trauma that the rest of our community is exposed to because of this situation. The complainant in this particular incident called the police from an adjoining household because bullets came through their wall, nearly missing them while they lie in bed this morning. So, this is a very serious problem. I've had a great opportunity to work closely with several people in the state and Governor Lamont's administration as well as Mayor O'Leary's administration regarding these common sense solutions. And there's no doubt in my mind that situations like that are occurring right now in Waterbury could be avoided if some of these gun law solutions would be supported by legislation and passed. So, Lieutenant Governor, thank you very much for the opportunity this morning.
Thank you, Chief. All right, so with that, any questions?
Lieutenant Governor, we were at the public hearing yesterday along with your press conference, and there were folks who came to testify who were in support, but there were folks who were opposed, and a lot of what we heard were that people felt that their Second Amendment rights would be infringed upon, and a host of other things. But what do you want those people to do? What would you say to those that any sort of regulation would be infringed upon their Second?
I think that we have put forward very common sense measures that the vast majority, 2/3 of the people in our state and our country support. We need to put public safety first, and the package of our proposals are specifically targeted to end mass shootings, many of which are committed with rapid fire assault type weapons. We want to obliterate community violence that is plaguing this community and communities across our state, urban and suburban. We want to eliminate gun violence and domestic abuse situations. And we also want to eliminate deaths by firearm accidents. So to require that weapons be safely stored in a home and that there's a waiting period so that there's a cooling off period so people don't act rashly. These are just smart, common sense measures to protect people, to keep them safe, to protect women and children and families. And I think that the vast majority of our citizens in Connecticut and Americans across the country are in strong support, and I'll let anyone else who wants to weigh in on that.
I think to answer your question, none of the laws that have ever been proposed by Connecticut and also that are being proposed by the governor this session are in violation of anyone's constitutional rights. And this is something that has been upheld time and time again by our courts. Just because there is a regulation on gun possession does not mean that it is violating the Constitution. In fact, the Supreme Court has said that states are allowed to regulate guns. And everything that is being proposed, these are reasonable regulations to make sure that we're all safe. It doesn't prevent people from getting a permit and owning a firearm. What it does, though, is it prevents dangerous people, domestic abusers that have already shown that they cannot abide within the law. And it also, we are asking people to make sure that they are responsible gun owners. Even the NRA teaches you have to store your weapon. And I didn't hear a single testimony yesterday about anyone that was opposed to the provisions in the bill that really deal with domestic abusers. I mean, this is something that we have to do. We have to do it because our lives depend on it.
I guess just to add to that, I think on a basic human level, I mean, you just heard from the chief too. I guess what I would say to those individuals is like, what would you want for your family in a situation? So it's not about taking away an individual's right to safely store and possess a firearm. It's really about, you know, what would you want for your child or your daughter, your sister, your niece, your loved ones. And I think that's really the question at the end of the day. It's not about taking away somebody's rights. It's really about what's best for you and your family, and then collectively the community. And I think that's just a basic question that we could pose to anybody. And I think the response would be that these laws are going to keep people safer. They're not going to infringe on anybody's rights, but they're going to keep those that often don't have as much of a voice, especially children, safer.
Anybody else? Anyone else? All right. We really appreciate everyone coming. Thank you.
Thank you.